Welcome to the Northern Leaders podcast, which shines a light on people in the North doing amazing things. And our special guest today definitely ticks that box. Andrew J. Turner, MBE, is the founder and the chairman of Chorley Group. It's a car dealership based in Lancashire, and they've got 22 car franchise dealerships across the county, turning over nearly £300 million. But it wasn't always like that. Andy was born in Blackburn, one of 8 children. He shared a bedroom with his 4 brothers before he entered the world of business. Now, away from business, he's a phenomenal charity worker. He's raised millions of pounds for charities. He got the MBE for services to Chorley. It's not all good news. He's a Blackburn Rovers fan for his sins, but I think you'll enjoy this interview with Andy Turner. This episode of Northern Leaders podcast is sponsored by Sancus UK, which is a real estate lender based in Manchester. Sancus UK is part of the wider Sancus Lending Group, which has offices in London, Jersey and Dublin. They specialise in short-term lending solutions to support their clients' purchase and refinance requirements, including development funding for SME house builders, as well as investors specialising in residential and commercial assets. Their ethos is simple, and that's to deliver straightforward financing for their clients, which ensures they stand out from the crowd. That's Sancus UK, standing out from the crowd. Welcome back to this episode of the Northern Leaders podcast with our special guest, Andy Turner. You heard about him before the interval. Andy, welcome.
Welcome to you too, Chris. Nice to see you.
Thanks very much. Andy, now we always start the podcast with the same couple of questions. The first one is, what does the North mean to you?
Well, I was born and brought up in Blackburn. I've lived in the North my whole life. It's been very, very good to me. It's been kind to me, and I've seen a lot of progress and a lot of success in the Northwest, and particularly in Lancashire.
And how do you define leadership?
Leadership. Well, I would say really just accepting people and getting the very, very best out of people. From the beginning of starting business, leadership was, if I cast my mind back and think, well, how did I start to lead people? I just got on with the job and did it with them. So I believe that leadership is really working with people, not having people working for you. I don't like I work for you. I would much prefer to say I work with you.
Really good definition, that, Andy. Okay, so before we talk about your remarkable entrepreneurial journey, we're going to take you back to the very beginning, your childhood. So you mentioned born in Blackburn, one of 8 brothers and sisters. I think there's 5 brothers, 3 sisters. And the 5 brothers used to share a room. It was a converted loft, wasn't it, above a shop. What was that like?
Well, it was challenging. It was very, very challenging. We had 5 beds lined up. There was no room to walk along the front or the back of the beds to get to the end one. So my eldest brother slept in the end bed, which meant that when he came in late at night, he'd climb over all the other 4 of you.
Did you learn to swim in that, in that bed?
We just learned to swim in life with 5 brothers.
Yeah. I suppose in a way, because they were actually 3 bunk beds cut in half, weren't they? Because the room wasn't big enough to have them as bunk beds, were they?
That's right. It wasn't high enough to have them as bunks, so we dismantled them and lined them up alongside each other.
No computers in those days or TVs, no luxuries in that room.
Absolutely not.
No. Did you have a picture of it? I'd love to see a picture of that. If a picture paints 1,000 words, that picture would.
Well, the picture wouldn't be a picture like today, because in those days we didn't have a phone.
Yeah.
So you couldn't take a picture that easily. We only had one bulb hanging from the ceiling, so it was unlikely that a camera would have actually worked in there because it was so dark.
For the benefit of our listeners, you are only 65. You paint a picture like it was like 1833, some Edwardian home or something.
Well, it was an outside toilet.
Yeah.
Outside toilet, yeah.
And just did the one toilet for the whole family of 10?
Yes.
Right. And what was that like in the depth of winter?
Amazing. The spiders in there were just incredible.
You're not scared of spiders?
Not now.
No, not now. Look, your dad used to run a greengrocer market stall, And at the age of 5, you could weigh a £5 bag of spuds, couldn't you? That was your claim to fame, I think.
Yeah, and it wasn't a £5 weighed out on electronic scale. It was a £5 weight on one side and weighing the potatoes on the other until the scale balanced.
So what did your dad say to you? If you could weigh out a £56 bag of spuds or something, it was something like that, wasn't it? You'll be okay.
My dad used to say, if you can get 12 £5 bags out of a £56 sack, you'll have succeeded.
And that was the measure of his success.
Yes.
And what life lessons did you learn from your parents? Because your dad was a remarkable guy. He'd be up at 5 on the market stalls, and then he'd work, I think, at an off license, and be back in at 10, and he'd be back the following day. What life lessons did you learn from your parents in that childhood?
My parents were two of the hardest working people that you could have ever met. They didn't have a lot. They had humble beginnings themselves, but then to have 8 kids on top of that, if anybody could try to compare with bringing 8 kids up today, it would just be unfathomable. You just wouldn't want to think about it. But my mum, all I remember of my mum is working. When she was cooking for 8 people, 8 kids, and we weren't the easiest of kids to manage. There was problems that developed with the family. When I say problems,
well, you get them with every family, don't you?
Problems because there was a bit of, as we would have said then, we were scallies, scallywags. You know.
What were your parents called?
My dad was George. My mum was Stella.
I was going to ask if there was a telly in the house, but the fact that you're one of 8 kids suggests that there wasn't.
Well, there was only one.
There was only one telly.
It was a celebration when we got BBC Two. Yeah. We all sat round to watch it.
Did you have a car? It must have been a big car if you did.
No, we had a van.
A van?
We had a van, yeah, because we...
And you could cram all of them in there, could you?
Yes, yeah, we had a van, so we could obviously use it for the cash and carry going to market stalls. There's plenty of fights happened in the back of the van.
When you talk about your childhood and you talk about your parents and you talk about sharing a room with your brothers, you're smiling. You know, you might not have had a lot of money, but there was no shortage of love in that house, I'm guessing.
No, it was fantastic. You talk about what do we have? Did we have a car? We had a van. I remember going up Brookhouse Lane in Blackburn, centre of Blackburn. My dad was taking us to school, and there was 4 lads in the back of the van at the time, and we started fighting, and my brother punched me, and I hit the back door of the van. The van door fell open, and I fell out onto the road. The answer from my dad's point of view was that, well, you shouldn't have been fighting. You can walk the rest of the way now. Yeah,
well, you've got 2 broken legs and a broken arm. I suppose I think you're the fourth son. So I don't suppose you ever saw a new pair of shoes or a new pair of trousers, did you? Hand-me-downs for everything.
We always had hand-me-downs, yeah. We had hand-me-downs. It was a challenging time, but who cared? No. It didn't matter. It really didn't matter.
Yeah, simple pleasures. Your childhood was interesting. You were taught by nuns at St Albans School in Blackburn before going to St Augustine's School. And then you left there to go to college, I think. You're 15 when you left school. Your mum made you go to college for 6 months. You absconded. Would it be fair to say, Andy, that you and school didn't get on?
I was never over fond of school. My mum was far more into education. She wasn't really into education, but she tried to instill it in us. So what would happen, my mum would get us all ready and pack us off and send us out the front door to get off to school. And my dad would come out the back door, pull you to one side and say, listen, pull a sickie at lunchtime. I need some help this afternoon in the shop.
Yeah.
So they had completely different views on education.
But you learned something off both of them.
Absolutely.
I read Gary Neville's book, and he was speaking about his dad, Neville, and his catchphrase, one of his catchphrases, Gary Neville's, is attack the day, because he'd hear his dad get up. I think he was a driver, and he'd be driving all over the country, but he knew if he got up early, was in the van and on the road by 4 o'clock, the traffic would be light. And he said that sort of instilled a work ethic in him. My own dad was a miner, and he'd be at work for 6, so you'd hear him 5 o'clock. You know, I suppose when you look back on those memories, because both your parents aren't here anymore, are they?
No.
When you think about those moments and what you learnt from them, what was it? Was it the way to look after customers? You know, that nothing comes to you for nothing. You know, you got to work for what you have. What did you learn off your parents?
We learnt that, an early start was just part of the cause. We well, you had to get up because there was an expression, first up, best dressed. Well, in our house, it was first up, best fed. And if you didn't get up, you'd go hungry because somebody else would eat your breakfast.
Yeah.
So, we very much learnt about work ethic. You had to get up and get on with it. You would not want to stay in bed. And we never have been. None of the family. We're all exactly the same. We're all early risers. We're all up and out. Even now, as we got a little bit older, and some of my brothers have retired, some are semi-retired, but it's still 5, 6 o'clock up, started and out.
Yeah.
My dad was like it till he was 88, and a family expression that developed was something he always used to say to us in the morning. I've been in park since 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
We used to wonder what he was doing in the park at 5 o'clock, but
Yeah.
he was always referring to, I was in the park at 5, I was up and out, and it was like, so don't think you're going to be lying in bed, because you won't be. And he was 88, and he would still not allow you, as adults, to stay in bed.
That phrase you used there, first up, best dressed, that sort of resonates with me and my sort of childhood as well. And I've always been an early riser, mainly because of my dad as well. This is the Northern Leaders podcast. We celebrate the North and we celebrate leadership as well. Back then when you were growing up in Lancashire, what was Lancashire like? I mean, I'm wondering what you had for your breakfast. It wasn't a full English, was it?
No, my recollection of breakfast was a huge tub of porridge, huge tub, and you could all dip in. But you can imagine the size of the pan that my mum used to cook that in. It would cover 2 burners, and you'd get stuck into that. And you'd have toast, and as we got a little bit more affluent, we'd have anything that was out of date for out of the shop or the market stall. So that was great. If you had some out-of-date sausages, well, that was a real treat for you.
Listen, happy days. I think there'll be people listening to this podcast now, punching the air, saying, I told you what it was like when I was a kid. You'll probably get your own TV show on the back of this, Andy. Big sliding doors moment for you. Obviously, you left school, left college, ended up working with your dad on the market stalls. You got the gift of the gab from that, partly, I would imagine. You get to 21, and your girlfriend at the time says to you, Andy, you've got to get a proper job. And you end up getting a job at A&B Motors in Newton Le Willows. You become a car salesman, which is where it all began. Just describe that. Were you like a duck to water?
Well, people say to me, why did you get involved in the motor industry? And there was no real reason other than the fact that I knew 1 or 2 guys who were in it who had a car when I had a van, and they had a few quid in the pocket, and they seemed to live a better lifestyle than me. So I thought, I want a little bit of what they've got. So I decided to try to get a proper job. But it was the first time I'd been for an interview. So it was very daunting for me. So I went to my first job interview, a place called Skelmersdale Motors, surprisingly in Skelmersdale, where I had a job interview. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified.
Did you have a shirt and tie on?
I had a shirt and tie, and I was in my Escort van that we used to go into the market. And the guy interviewed me and turned to me and he said, well, let me tell you a bit of advice. If I was you, I'd go back to selling cabbages and cauliflowers because you will never make it in the motor industry.
And now that can have one of 2 effects on a person. It can demotivate him and they can go away and go back to selling cabbages, or they can say, I'll prove you wrong. Clearly, it was the second one for you, was it?
So I left there from that organised interview devastated. I just couldn't believe what had just happened. It was an awful experience. So I got back in my van and I drove down the M6 to A&B in Newton Le Willows, which was a huge dealership at the time. It was actually the biggest Datsun garage in the UK at the time. So I went in and I went to reception and said, I'm looking for a job. I fancy a job as a car salesman. Is there any chance of an interview? So they asked me to sit in a room and wait, which I did for 3 hours before a gentleman, Bob Hoynville, came to interview me. And as we started to talk, I talked about his background, my background. His background was he worked in the grocery industry worked on market stalls and had a very, very similar background to me. Obviously, he was significantly older than me. And we hit it off, and he gave me a job there and then.
For me, business and life's all about people, and experiences make people. You mentioned working at a Datsun dealership. My second car was a Datsun Cherry. Yeah, and it was
Fantastic car.
I shared it with my twin brother, and then one day we couldn't work out why the radio wouldn't work anymore, and that's because my brother Eddie had decided to cut the speakers to replace them.
You must have had a very high spec one if you had a radio in it.
Yeah, well, we had a radio and it didn't play anymore because Eddie never got the speakers to work. But yeah, Datsun Cherry. I mean, look it up. For people who are wondering what a Datsun Cherry looks like, great car. You love cars, so you do that job. You're pretty good at it, and you sell a lot of cars. I don't know how many cars we sell in a week. Do you remember?
No, I was selling around 30 a month.
30 a month,
Yeah,
and then you get a commission on each sale, would you?
Yes.
So pretty much one a day.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right.
But I did have an odd day off now and again.
Yeah,
but not
right.
very often.
Okay, so just talk me through your pattern, right? Okay, I go onto the forecourt. I'm looking at a car, and I'm, with my wife, and maybe looking at one or two cars. Would you then come up to me? What would you say to me?
At that time, it was completely different than it was today because you had challenges prior to actually speaking to a customer, because at that time there were 30 salesmen in that dealership, and you were on £200 a month salary, basic, and the rest was based on commission. So if you saw a customer on the forecourt, you first of all had to fight off another 29 salesmen to get there first.
Yeah.
So that was the first challenge. I would always, if I approached a customer, I would always ask the customer about their car. I wouldn't try to sell them a car. I would not try to sell them a car. Hopefully I would have already seen what they've come in, and I would go up to the customer and I would say, "You didn't just pull up in that silver Datsun Cherry, did you?" Yeah. And they might say, "Yes, I did." And say, "Well, funnily enough, I've had somebody looking for one of those this morning."
Yeah.
And they would then very easily open up into a conversation.
The key is the conversation. It's when
opening the conversation.
Yeah, in my line of work, trying to get somebody to talk to you, it all depends on that opening conversation.
Absolutely.
And once you start to get them asking questions about you, then you're in. It's a phenomenal story. The motor industry's changed. It's beyond recognition. I was interviewing a guy, Michael Smythe, you might remember.
Yeah, Michael.
Very well known.
Yeah.
But and his 3 sons run the business. But we were talking about the fact that back in the day, I think the average number of visits to a car or test drives before you bought it was something like 7.
Yeah.
And I don't know how far we're going back. Now it was like 1.2, and a lot of people now buy cars without having driven them or seen them.
It's about 0.4 now.
It's 0.4.
0.4 now. I was away on holiday in Spain a month ago, and I was sat in a bar talking to a guy who hired a car from a local car hire company, and he was complaining about the amount of money per month he was paying to hire it, and on a monthly basis it goes up for the summer months. And I just said to him, "Why don't you just buy one?" He said, "Well, how do I do that when I'm in Spain?" I said, "Well, if you live here," I said, "I can organise one for you." So over a coffee, he went on his phone, he had a look on our website, he chose a BMW, a second-hand BMW M3, and within 6 days, the car had been sold, financed, paid out, and he was driving it in Marbella.
Yeah. Now, the thing about you is that you know everything about a car. I bet you can tell me how many miles are on that clock.
Well, I can tell you about that one. That was 13,000. But as I've got older, somebody said only this week, they said when the business was a little smaller, when we had 3, 4, 5 dealerships, I would know every car on every site, and I would know most of the registration numbers, most of the standing values when we had maybe 3 or 4 garages. Now, I can't do it.
See,
the aging process, and it's got bigger.
But you're talking about we're talking about Adam, your son, and the cars that he got growing up. And yeah, he got this car on this time, and that had X number of miles on the clock, and then he got this one at X number of miles on the clock as well. I mean, you know, numbers for you, it's a numbers business, isn't it?
It's a numbers business, yeah. When we talk about development, growth, both with my son, my grandkids, I always say to the most important subject of all when you're studying is maths. Maths. Get your mathematics, understand your mathematics, and lots of the other problems will go away. When my dad had his first shop rather than market store, he would tell you to take a box of 12 maybe bottles of bleach, and he would say to you, price it up with 12% margin on. You'd know how much it cost you, and he would leave you to it to work out the 12%. And then when VAT came in, you got the price of a bottle plus VAT and then 12% margin on. And if you couldn't do it in your head, he would educate you until you could do it in your head.
No, it's great advice. It's great advice. You left that first job at A&B Motors in 1989. Your son was born. I think you walked out over an argument, actually.
Well, my son was born in 88. He was born in November 88. And he was a very challenging baby.
He's a challenging adult.
He's still a challenging adult, yeah. He was a very challenging baby. So that was November 88. June the 20th, 89, memorable date for me. I had a fallout with my boss, at which point I acted probably a little bit irrationally at the time, and I walked out. The problem with the motor industry is that when you walk out, that is exactly what you do, because you've actually got a company car usually. So when you walk out, you hand your keys back and walk out. Yeah. At that point, I'd actually moved to a place in Wigan. I was working in Wigan, another branch of the same company. So I had time to consider my options as I walked out from Wigan back to Chorley.
Yeah, and you had to walk back. So what you did is you had to succeed. So you decided to launch your own car dealership. I think it was called the Bugle Inn in Exton.
Bugle Inn, yeah, that was it.
And do you remember the first car that you bought and sold?
Yeah, the first car that I bought, which was pretty much as soon as I won't say as soon as I got home, but within a day or so of contemplating what the next option was. And looking through all the papers as they were at the time. We didn't go on the internet. There was no such thing then. Yeah. Scrolling the papers and found a Mini Clubman estate car, 1979 on a T with 29,000 miles. Yeah. Not that I can remember it particularly well. It was advertised at £250 in the local paper, the Chorley Guardian.
Great paper, great publication.
And the problem was I didn't have any money. So I borrowed £50 off my mum, and I borrowed £50 off my mother-in-law, which was the most they could lend me. I had a tenner of my own, and decided that we needed to buy this Mini Clubman estate car. People say to me, well, how much did you decide? How did you decide how much to give for it? Well, it was all the money I'd got. So we went and managed to buy it for £110.
And you sold it for what?
We sold it for £510 at Liverpool Motor Auctions in West Derby Road in Liverpool.
And how did you celebrate that landmark?
How do we celebrate the landmark? Well, Adam was still in a backpack on my back at the time, so we spent the evening in the motor auctions, full of smoke, fumes. Not the place for a 12-month-old baby, really, but it was okay. It was a learning curve for him. I had a cup of tea in a polystyrene cup. I distinctly remember as the car came in the auction, I was actually shaking that much because this was do or die. If it didn't sell, I owed £110. If it did sell, well, it was the start of things. I was spilling the tea. I was shaking that much up until the car got to £150, at which time my hand stabilised. And when it got to £400, I was shaking again with excitement. So when it actually sold, it was fantastic. Best experience ever.
And I think you did what everybody from Chorley does when they have a landmark moment. You went to Little Chef.
Well, we actually stayed behind till the auction finished and asked if there was, please, can you pay us now?
Yeah.
I said, no, we're paying a week. I said, well, please, can you pay us now if we wait? And so he took his fees and he charged us £60 to sell it, gave us £450 back, went to the Little Chef on the East Lancs Road at Carmill Dam and had an Olympic breakfast and a bottle of Gerby baby food for Adam.
And that's it doesn't get better than that. You started your business in a recession, then you had the 2008 financial crash, which really did nearly put you out of business, didn't it?
Yeah, it was a terrible time in business. It was very, very challenging, and what people, a lot of people don't understand yet is the journey from starting with no money and borrowing the money for your first car, and the journey continued. And when we'd got 4 cars, we were borrowing money to buy 4 cars, and we were hoping to buy. We would go out. We would buy cars on a Friday, and we would avoid collecting them until after 4 o'clock when the bank had closed. So you could pay for them, you could give them a check, and fingers crossed you sold them before Wednesday the following week when that check was going to hit your bank, because everything was done by post in those days. So everything was much slower in terms of banking arrangements. So if you hadn't sold the car by the Tuesday, you would move it on anyway, whether it be in the trade or whatever, just to get your money back, so you can get the money in the bank to cover the check that you'd paid for it with the Friday before.
It really was hand to mouth.
Hand to mouth, absolutely, yeah.
Out of small
Teaming
acorns,
and ladling.
Out of small acorns grow giant oak trees. You look at the Chorley Group today. I mentioned 22 franchise car dealerships across Lancashire, headquartered in Chorley, unsurprisingly. You're doing about nearly pushing 300 million in turnover. You've got 450 staff. I mean, how did you get from one car for 110 quid to a near 300 million pound turnover car dealership business?
20,000 cars a year.
20,000 cars a year.
How do we get from there to there? I sometimes sit back, scratch my head and think, how the hell did we get here?
Yeah.
It's been a journey. It's been a great journey. It's been exciting. There's been plenty of ups and downs on the way. You mentioned 2008. We were paying the wages using credit cards. We were just doing anything we possibly could. It was a banking crisis. It wasn't specifically a motor trade crisis. It was a banking crisis. The banks were running out of money. I remember we had an overdraft at the time, and what would happen, we always tried to manage the business, because my dad always taught us about standards. If you had an overdraft facility of £10,000, that's how much you were allowed to spend. Don't start spending 10,200, because that's not what you've agreed. You stick to what you've agreed. And he was very, very, very keen on the ethics of things. I've tried to say to my son, whatever it is that you do, don't ever try to be the most profitable dealership in the country. Don't try to be the slickest, the most profitable, but do an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. When you go to bed at night, put your head on the pillow, knowing that you've not done anybody down. You've done the best of everything. You've done it in the best way. 2008, the recession hit. We would keep within our overdraft facility, because we've always used an overdraft, because we've never had any money as we built the business, and we continue to trade and trade and trade. But we work hard at balancing the funds. So if we had an overdraft of whatever it might have been then, I can't remember what it would be, but if it was £50,000, we would work with a £40,000 overdraft. But what the bank did then was they skimmed the 10 off the top and said, you're only using 40, so you can only have 40, which meant you had no headroom. So then, of course, what you would do is you would adjust things. Come on, let's not leave ourselves exposed. Let's have a £35,000 exposure with a 40 limit. But as soon as you did that, they said, right, okay, well, you're not using 40, you're using 30. So they skimmed that off as well.
People don't realise how brutal the banks were
Brutal,
back then.
absolutely brutal. You'd pay for a car, and you had to make sure that you'd got another check crossing for the next one, because if there was some slack, they would have taken it away from you.
Yeah, it was a different time. Going to go for a quick break, and when we come back, Andy, we're going to talk still more about cars, but also about your amazing charitable journey as well. Welcome back to the Northern Leaders podcast. This episode, I'm joined by Andy Turner, an amazing guy. We heard some amazing stories before the interval. I'm going to talk a bit more about your career, but then I'm going to talk about your charitable work as well. You've got a son called Adam, and great lad, a really nice guy, and also a Blackburn Rovers fan, fortunately for him. You made sure when Andy became the MD of the business 5 years ago, but he's had to work his way up. I often think when you have family-run businesses and children step up and run businesses, the ones that fail are quite often the ones where they've got it too easy. Adam never had it too easy, has he?
Well, obviously the business started as Adam was born, pretty much. When a lot of the growth started, which was in 1994, we had our first Nissan dealership. Now, at the time, you'll note I referred to Nissan there rather than Datsun. 1992, Datsun failed to exist and became Nissan, at which point the manufacturer needed to develop a dealer network, a brand new dealer network under Nissan. I've got to say, at that point, they weren't too fussy who they got. So we managed to get a franchise opportunity in Chorley. There was an open point. And we did even better than that. We managed to convince them that we could run a great Nissan dealership from home. So Bugle Inn, which is where our family home was, we used to sell a few used cars off there, in 1994, became a Nissan dealership. We had one ramp, we had a lineup of cars on the front, and we had the parts department in Adam's bedroom.
Right.
So he has been in it since the beginning.
You, like I mentioned, is that he's had to work his way up. I mean, I know in terms of the cars that he got, I think he was selling pizzas at the start, wasn't he?
Well, we were very keen on, when I looked at my own background, Adam's mum looked at my background, where I met his mum actually at the dealership where I was working at A&B. But she looked at my background and what I was achieving and where I was getting, and she realised that where we were at that point, scratching the living, she decided it would be a far better idea to get an education and do it properly. So she was very, very keen on Adam having an education. So he went to a good school, he went to a good college, he went to university, he got his degree, and then he stayed on and got his master's.
Yeah. But
during that time, of course, he had to live, and we were needing every penny we had to develop and grow the business. So Adam had to work. So at 17 years of age, when he just got his first second-hand car, which was a Citroen Saxo.
How many miles?
28,000. It was a very low mileage one, very low mileage, but not for long, because he had to start work. So he got a job delivering pizzas for Pizza Hut in Leyland.
Yeah.
I jab him frequently about the fact that he didn't know his way around anywhere. So he said, could he have what was sat nav in the time, TomTom? So we bought him a TomTom, which at the time was very expensive. Well, I thought it was expensive. It was £250 for a TomTom, so that he could find the houses where he could deliver the pizzas to. And every time he delivered a pizza, he got paid 50p. I don't think he ever covered the cost of the TomTom.
No. No, well, I was going to say, in those early days, I don't think anybody got, without the TomTom, I don't think anybody got a hot pizza. Going to talk about your charitable work. So I'm a big supporter of Chorley. I live in Chorley, and your roots are there. You got involved in Inspire Youth Zone in Chorley in 2016, and I've seen the difference it makes to people's lives. You've just been made lifetime president. I think it supports over 11,000 young people. A lot of these people, youngsters, haven't got much. They haven't got much. You think it's almost sacrosanct that businesses who have made success and have made a few quid, give back to things like that, don't you?
And I firmly believe that, particularly locally, I think if a local community has been good to you, I think you should give a bit back to that community. I think it's important. I think it's very, very important that when you look at the young people in our hometown, who people say, oh, they're hanging around the town centre. They say very little good about young people, and yet at the end of the day, these are kids that are growing up. I look back at my background and my upbringing. I was fortunate to have caring parents, but that didn't stop me from get my collar felt once or twice, or get myself in situations. Some of these young people in our hometown, they've got nothing. They don't even have parents who actually particularly care about them. So it's very easy for them to go the wrong way. With a little bit of guidance, you can cause a fantastic amount of difference to some of these young people, these young lives, and some of the young people who have been members there over the years have developed now, and they're actually paid employees of the charity. And to go in and speak to those kids that you've seen develop from unable to leave the house because they had problems, they've had issues, to now actually taking a grown-up role and doing good things with other young people now.
There's a lot of northern business people who you'll know. Bill Holroyd.
Yeah, Bill was involved, yeah.
He was involved. Martin Ainscoe.
Yeah.
Ainscoe Cranes. He was heavily involved as well. And it's life-changing, and people can get these activities that they do. They're subsidised. Sometimes they're free. And it just gives kids something constructive to do. It's a game changer. You decided you were going to raise some money for the Youth Zone, and you raised 60 grand by climbing Everest. Now, I'm not going to, for the benefit of the people who are listening to this podcast as opposed to watching it on YouTube as well, you're not 6'3" and ripped, are you, Andy? You know, and
I'm not saying I wasn't once.
No, you're probably more ripped than I was as well. But climbing Everest is not something that would have appealed to me. It clearly appealed to you. You decided you want to raise as much money as possible, but you came up with quite a novel way of raising that money, didn't you?
Well, yeah, it was for my 60th birthday. I was 60, so I thought quite apt. I want to raise £60,000 in sponsorship. I've got a good network of friends, colleagues, business people, most of whom looked at me and said, are you having a laugh? There is no way that you are going to manage that. I wasn't a mountain climber. I did my training going up to Rivington Pike, which most of my mates found quite funny, because they knew that I was not an athlete. That wasn't what I was about. I'd prefer to be working than doing athletics. So to help them along with the commitment, I said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. You're so convinced that I won't achieve it, that whatever you sponsor me for, you pay if I do it, and I pay if I don't.
And they thought they wanted a safe bet there.
They thought they were on a safe bet, yeah.
Now, needless to say, you did it. I think it's 11 days, temperatures of -20. I mean, you couldn't just nip to Brown's or Butcher's, for a meat pie. So what was that experience like?
It was, it reminded me of being at home when I was young, with no heating and no fire. And no, it was challenging. It was very, very tough. It was brutal. It was brutal. Some people would say it isn't brutal. It is for a 60-year-old guy who does not go mountain climbing.
No, but that makes it all the more laudable. 2015, you cycled 1,100 kilometres from Switzerland back home with your brother. You raised enough money to fund Chorley Mencat for a year. This is what I say about northern leaders. You've been successful in business, but you've given back. But what was interesting was that, like, you could have afforded to have stayed in a nice hotel at the end of a day's riding. You set yourself a budget of €40. That was to cover your cost of your food and your accommodation, wasn't it?
Well, I didn't actually set the budget. My brother did, who I did the ride with,
Yeah.
which again instills the fact that it was a cultural thing from the family. My brother said, right, okay, yeah, we'll cycle back. We've got €40 a day. Make sure we make it last. I fell off my bike 7 times. He was a good cyclist. I wasn't. Again, I did it because I wanted to do it for Mencap, not because I was a cyclist. He suggested I got a bike with clip-on shoes. It was the worst thing I could have ever done. I couldn't get my feet out. Fell off the bike 7 times and spent the night, one night in A&E in Arnhem.
You didn't have stabilisers as well, did you?
No, I didn't have stabilisers, no. But I had a few injuries.
I kind of say I'm with you in that. Those clip-on shoes, it was a death trap.
They're dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. It's just I never understood it because if you can't get your feet out in time, you go over
like that,
like a ton of bricks. So you did that. You raised a lot of money for Mencap. And getting back to the business, by your own admission, HR probably wasn't your strong point. And the one thing you've always sort of prided yourself on is that you bring people in who are better than you. It's a phrase you hear a lot these days, always surround yourself by people who are better than you. You've been talking about this for years and years and years. So you brought a professional in called Stacey, didn't you? And I think she sat on the board.
Yeah, I had a bit of an issue with an employee, which ended up causing me an untold amount of problem. So I realised at that point I actually needed to bring somebody in to help manage the HR side of the business. So we brought Stacey on as a board director to look after all the legal side of the business.
Yeah, and then I don't know if it was a Master Andy Turner plan, but Stacey ended up becoming your daughter-in-law and Andy's wife.
Adam's wife.
Sorry. Okay. I might leave that in there just for the laugh effect, just for the humour. So Stacey became Adam's wife, your daughter-in-law, and then she co-founded CG Professionals, which is a law firm headquartered in Chorley, now got offices across the northwest, growing like Topsy. I mean, was that always your plan? Was that your master plan?
Well, it wasn't a plan. Like lots of things in business, people will say to me, did you plan to build a business this big? Well, no, it just seemed to happen. Did you plan to build a law firm? No, we didn't. We brought Stacey in, looking after all the legal side of the business, really, not just the employment side, but the legal side of the business. But because she was so highly regarded and such a good reputation, she kept getting asked to do work externally. And she was doing that much external work that it became a bit of a problem that I was paying her wages and she was working for lots of other people who were paying her. So she asked if she could bring some help in. I said, yeah, no problem, bring some help in. So she brought some help in. Very quickly, they became too busy. So she then brought some more help in. And I was thinking, we're starting to spend more on legal and employment stuff than I ever dreamt of. So at that point, Stacey said, look, I'm getting enough inquiries, enough people wanting to work with us. Why don't we set this up as a law firm? And that was 7 years ago.
But you think about, like Stacey, she's very people-orientated, very, people-centric, and I'm not saying that comes from you, but that certainly shares your ethos as well. Her, I think Louise was the co-founder, wasn't it? They've really grown CG and really put it on the map in a big way. I'd like to share a personal story about you, if I may. Probably got about 10 minutes to go. But so I've got 2 daughters. When my eldest daughter was 16, she was doing a prom. I never had proms in my day. I don't know about you.
No, absolutely not.
No. So, Dad, we're going to do a prom. And then I saw the price of the dress. I thought, wow. And then she said, I need to get to the prom in a nice car. And my car apparently didn't fit the bill. I said, she said, no, you understand. People turn up in tanks and milk floats and like vintage cars and all sorts. You've got to make an entrance. And I don't know how I came to mention it to you, or somebody might have mentioned to me that you got a vintage Bentley and that you always drove people to proms. never accepted a penny off them, and you just did it because it was a nice thing to do. And you ended up driving my eldest daughter and her two friends to, I think it was Hay Hall, if I remember rightly,
Yeah.
in your Bentley. And that's just a story of Andy Turner, isn't it? That's what you do.
Yeah, it doesn't cost me anything to do it, does it? If it doesn't cost me anything, and I can bring something good, pleasure, somebody gets something out of it, and it might take me a little bit of time, that's all. Yeah, giving up a little bit of time. But honestly, when you see the pleasure it gives to other people, why would you not?
No,
Why would you not?
100% agree with that. And talk about pleasure, it brings me on to watching Blackburn Rovers, which you've got a box there. So Adam goes, your grandson, you've got two grandchildren, your grandchild goes there as well. But there's a story that I quite like, is that you go for a chippy every week with one of your grandchildren, don't you? One of your grandsons.
Yeah, yeah. My youngest grandson, he looks forward to having his wild Wednesdays. So I pick him up from school on a Wednesday, over in Croston, and then we come over into Chorley. We park up in Chorley. We go to a little shop there, Reed's Refillery, where he gets his marshmallows.
Yeah.
He goes and weighs them out himself. He's got a budget. He knows how much per 100 grams they are now. It would have been how much a quarter in nowadays, but he knows how much he can get, and he has to go and he has to get his marshmallows, weigh them, pay for them, and then, providing he gets it right, we then go to the Chippy on Market Street, and we go and have... He has a joke with his granddad every Wednesday. He wants a change. He doesn't want sausage and chips this week. He wants chips and sausage.
Right. What do you have?
I have a small fish and take a lot of these chips.
Yeah.
So we don't waste them.
But that's family again. You know, I think what comes through the podcast is you started with family. You know, you've grown a business with family, and now you're at the age of 65 and still very busy. Family is still like the access
something
that
I get a tremendous amount of pleasure with is we will walk from the car to the Chippy, and I'll give him a £5, and we'll go into a charity shop, and the goal is he has to get as much stuff as he can for a £5 from the charity shop.
Yeah.
So he'll fill his boots, and he'll negotiate if he gets two of these. Can he get it for a little bit less than how much it would be for one? And then he'll spend his £5. And then when he gets all these bags full of stuff, we go and drop them off at another charity shop.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great.
It's just a bit of fun. It's just a bit of fun. But it being a bit of fun, we make it fun. But it's the best part of his education.
Yeah. And years from now, he'll remember that and he'll pass it on to other people as well. At least that's the hope. We always end the Northern Leaders podcast with two questions. Okay, the same questions. The first one is, what sort of leaders do you admire? Are there leaders that you identify with and respect?
I identify. I don't know if there's a particular person. I look at the people like I suppose it typifies the success stories. You look at Richard Branch, and you look at these guys. You think, how the hell did they manage to do that? And they can actually, if I look at people like that, I start thinking, why could I not have done that? I don't think that's great what I've achieved. I look at them and think, I could have done better. And I frequently say to people, just imagine what I could have done if I stayed at school.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually important. And I try to convey that to people now. When I'm working with a charity with young people, and they'll abscond from school. You can't keep them in school. And I try to say to them, look, this is what you can do. Just imagine what is out there, the opportunity. So who do I admire business in? I admire people in my own business who actually make a success of their roles. I think Stacey as a leader has been absolutely phenomenal. I think she's done an incredible job, along with Louise, of building that law firm, because whilst the motor industry has been a lifetime's build for me, I've been in that since 1981. I've been in it 40 years. Stacey's built a phenomenal business with Louise there in 7 years.
No. Well,
7
listen.
years.
So,
Take me 44.
yeah, no, I agree. You know, I think she is. I think they're both great actually. But as I said, both
They make a
personable.
great team. Adam and Stacey as a couple are a phenomenal couple doing a phenomenal job. And I say the one thing, there's probably many things that they've got in common, but a big thing for me that they have in common, they've both got an incredible work ethic.
Yeah.
Incredible work ethic.
No, and like I say, we've spoken about the importance of work ethic in your life and where you got it from. Final question is this: 65 years of age now, many years from now, you know, what would you want your epitaph to be?
Do the right thing. Do the right thing by people. Treat people with respect. Do the right thing. My dad had a plaque up in his hallway. It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. I think that's really answers it.
Yeah, your dad was a wise man as well. Andy Turner, thanks very much for taking part in the Northern Leaders podcast. We're going to go for a short interval. I'm going to give my reflections on the interview as well, and I wish you well. Thanks very much, Andy.
Thank you, Chris.
Business Cloud provides tech insight with Byte. To get the best business tech news straight into your inbox, just subscribe to our free newsletter. Details on our website. Welcome back to the Northern Leaders podcast. We've just interviewed Andy Turner, or he interviewed me half the time as well. An amazing guy. Started with next to nothing but a family of love in Blackburn, and he's grown a huge successful business that's turning over close to £300 million. Got lots of side businesses as well. What do I think of Andy Turner? Well, the thing about Andy, I've known him for a long time, and every time I speak to him, I find something else that I didn't know, and it's always nice. You won't find many people, if anyone, has got a bad word to say about him as well. He's straight down the line. I love the fact that he comes from a humble background, but he's remained humble now, even despite the fact that he's done okay for himself as well. All family orientated, you know, gives his kids and gives his grandkids the same upbringing that he had as well. And just a really nice guy. And I think people will listen to him. They'll listen to his stories. They'll listen to phrases like best, you know, first up, best dressed and stuff like that. And that will really strike a chord with them as well. So Andy, hugely indebted to you for coming in. I hope you enjoyed his story. And massive thanks to our sponsors today, Sancus UK. We couldn't do this podcast without them. So thank you for their support. Last but not least, thank you to What Media. Ellis, the producer, who puts this podcast together. Without What Media, we simply couldn't do it. And so if you do like the podcast, please give it a 5-star rating. Tell your friends and family. And let's get people talking about Northern Leaders and the Northern Leaders podcast. My name, as always, is Chris Maguire.